Before we get into the video, as always, condolences. Anytime you take a life, there's no coming back from that. Now imagine a man who held so loose morals that he would his own parents for selfish gains. Parents whom have loved and cherished him and helped him during financial hardships previously. And in order to repay his parents, it was alleged that this man, who was an ex-bouncer, had k'd them in their own home. It was brutal. And one of the parents also had a disability too. 29-year-old Martin Ruddy was found responsible for k'ing his parents so he could gain access to their wills sooner. It was said that Martin stood to inherit more than £80,000. The number was closer to 90,000. His parents, 64-year-old Eric Ruddy and 54-year-old Carol Ruddy, were k'd in the most heinous and atrocious way. It was barbaric. The husband and wife were found dying in their home on the 12th of December 2014. Police and paramedics found that both Eric and Carol had suffered. They had been bladed, throttled and also struck repeatedly with objects by their own child, Martin. He was the only child as well, Newcastle Crown Court heard. Martin was so disingenuous and a liar that he put on theatrics, claiming that an intruder forced their way into the family home and then demanded items like money and also jewellery. The intruder then bladed his parents before deciding to injure Martin. However, when police investigated the double M, they had looked into Martin's life, and his life was a mess. They found that Martin was the only beneficiary of his parents' will, and again the fortune was worth more than £80,000, which would serve Martin greatly. After all, he was in dire straits. His marriage was at a breaking point. His wife had left him and he had got himself into debt, and he struggled to pay back at least £5,000 that was owed to creditors and also his own family members, including the dad. Now, because Martin was not the smartest guy, he thought that he could solve his problems by making money by dealing drugs. Now, Eric had even loaned Martin, his own son, £4,000, which still hadn't been paid back. Now, it was also alleged that Martin was still trying to get more money out of the dad, and the dad refused. That money was there in case anything happened to Eric, his wife would be looked after. When Eric told his own son that unfortunately I can't give you any money, Martin was said to have made comments such as, "Why, don't be tight, you've already got enough money saved up, I mean there's £90,000 there." Eric had saved £90,000 again to provide for his disabled wife in the event that Eric was no longer there. That's what marriage was all about, and if something happened to the wife as well, then of course the next person to benefit from that money would be Martin. Police also noted that while Eric and Carol had been gravely injured, Martin's injuries were superficial in comparison. Now, police determined that the injuries to Martin had been caused by himself by using a brick and a broken glass and a pair of nail scissors. As an ex-bouncer, Martin was known to be strong and also hot-headed, despite the fact that he had no history of a criminal record. Police also noted that Eric Ruddy had received blunt force injuries with an object to the back of his head, which meant that he was not facing the person whom had attacked him. Carol had also been throttled with a HDMI cable. A neighbour also gave a statement to the police, explaining the walls separating the two houses were very thin, so thin in fact that you could hear the doors opening and closing shut. You could also hear footsteps whenever someone was in the hallway or the landing or the living room or going up the stairs. But on the night of the M, there was no noise at all. The house was quiet. In fact, the first time the neighbour, Andrew Hardy, had realised that something was wrong was when Martin came running to her property and banged on the front door and yelled his parents had been k'd by a group of attackers. The neighbour noted that a small pair of nail scissors had been sticking out of Martin's chest. Martin had then said, "I've been bladed." Andrew Hardy and her partner had ran back to Martin's family home, where they tried to give CPR to the husband and the wife. The HDMI cable was still on Carol's neck, and her walking stick was laid underneath her. Now Martin had knelt by his mum and he began to scream wildly, screaming, "My mam, my mam, my mam." He then says, "My mam," over and over and over again before rustling her as if trying to wake her up. it was already apparent that she had suffered and she was gone. With the theatrics continued, Martin then wiped his tears and then the snot and then told the neighbour that a mad gang had held him captive and then bladed him. Now, to be fair, Martin's story did not change, up from the point of being interviewed to the point of his sentence. Now, during the investigation, police looked at CCTV, tens of hours worth of footage that was catalogued. There were no signs of any gang coming or leaving the home. The way the home had been ransacked also was described as an organised mess, as though someone had thrown things in certain places with no direction or purpose. Now, following the incident on Eric and Carol, ambulance crew had rushed to the scene and they put the couple in the back of the ambulance before taking them to Newcastle Royal Infirmary, but tragically they were pronounced dead. Now, Martin was arrested and he was charged with the double M. In court, Martin of course pled not guilty to the double M. He maintained a gang of men had forced their way into the home, looking for money and valuables. He was also held against his will and then had been bladed. He begged them to leave the family alone, to leave his mum and dad alone and just take him instead. However, a jury at Newcastle Crown Court had found Martin Ruddy guilty of the M of his parents, both of them. Now, just before sentences, Judge Sloan told Martin Ruddy, "It's clear your actions have and will continue to cause devastating impacts. You have tried to spin a web of deceit around the decaying of your parents. That is the fiction you have clung to, from the first to the last." The judge also explained Martin had used a serrated blade to mark his dad's face deep to make it look like he had been ambushed, and then when he caught his mum dialing 999 to call for help, he then grabbed a HDMI cable and used it on her neck. Martin Ruddy was jailed for life, and he was told that he would have to serve a minimum term of 35 years in jail. Now, amazingly, some of Martin's own family have believed Martin's version of events and have stuck by his side and even visited him in jail. One friend says that when they spoke to Martin and visited him while he was in HMP, he explained when he is a free man, the first thing that he's going to do is go back to the family home and lay a wreath for his parents. He says that because he was not allowed to go to the funeral, sadly he's not been able to grieve for his parents, who he loved greatly. And Martin's defence team says that any mitigation was completely and utterly obliterated by the circumstances of the case. Martin Ruddy had no history of violence, and given his former relationship towards his parents, he would have a long time to suffer serious remorse. Now, only 3 people know exactly what took place in that house. That would be number 1, Martin Ruddy, and his parents, and sadly, his parents are not here to speak out. So the question is, does the crime match the sentence? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe.